Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 119 of the Hammer Territory podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Sunday evening. It is now the month of December, and I'm joined by Scott Coleman, post-Thanksgiving. Scott, how are you?
Hey, Brad, I am great. I hope you and everybody out there had a very happy Thanksgiving. And we're making some progress now in the offseason. We are a week away from the winter meetings, which will hopefully break the dam for moves across the league. But again, so far, it's kind of been the theme for not just the Braves, but basically like 95% of the league. It has been very quiet, but here we are, rain or shine. We will do a podcast, and hopefully there's something on the horizon sooner rather than later.
That would be helpful to be sure. And if you are new to the podcast, first of all, welcome aboard. We are part of the Foul Territory network of podcasts. We are Hammer Territory, covering the Braves all year long in comprehensive fashion. Please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. We're on Apple and Spotify, of course, and all the audio platforms. Plus, we are on YouTube if you want to see Scott and myself in video form. Welcome aboard on that as well. Please like the episode as you're watching it there. But yeah, we're getting closer to where it should be picking up a little bit. Other than the Dodgers and the Angels, it's been pretty quiet for the last couple of weeks. The Braves did make one roster move, and I say that very lovingly, but it's a very minor roster move over the weekend.
Yeah. If you're listening to this, take a seat because it's a big one. I don't want anyone to be shocked by what we're about to say.
It is not a big one at all. Scott's lying to you, but no, it's the Braves signed right-hander Conor Gillespie, I believe, Gillespie, however you say it, to a one-year non-guaranteed deal. It was originally reported by, I think it was Bob Nightingale as a guaranteed contract. It's probably a split deal, but it's certainly non-guaranteed. So that means it's not exactly a high-impact move. He is 28 years old. He's been on the fringe of the majors in the past. Not a total non-entity. Like, he could be on the team this year at some point. So we shouldn't just poo-poo it completely, but it's a split contract. It's something we would not talk about a lot if this was not the only thing to talk about today.
Yeah, I'm ashamed that we didn't do a 30-minute emergency podcast over Thanksgiving weekend about Conor Gillespie. But in all seriousness, he will be at spring training. He'll have a chance to win a spot. The bullpen will for sure need a kind of long man. And I guess Gillespie, who both started and relieved for Cleveland's AAA team last year, he might be a live arm. He got a decent number of strikeouts in the minor leagues. But at the end of the day, he's 28 years old and he has 8 major league innings under his belt. 8. Very much just a depth signing. And probably if you go to Gwinnett Stripers games a lot, you'll probably see Conor pitch quite a bit.
That is my guess as well. Other than that, our episode today, just for some background over the offseason, right now we're in a dead time, at least it has been so far. It shouldn't always be a dead time right now, but it is. We'll be sprinkling some player kind of like position capsule reviews up and down the roster during the winter. And the first one of those is actually going to happen today, and kind of sneak it in under the wire here a little bit, because we talked a lot about shortstop changes and upgrades and Willie Adames and Ha-Seong Kim and trade stuff, etc. But we have not done a dedicated episode or dedicated even segment about Orlando Arcia himself. So we'll get to that in a second. But shortstop will be the position that we kind of review first. It is prominent right now, and we're doing it first because they could upgrade it like as soon as like tomorrow. I would not be shocked if they made a move in the next couple of days at shortstop. But I'll start here, Scott. Let's just say this: the Braves had 623 plate appearances from shortstops last year. More than 600 of them were Orlando Arcia. So essentially, there are some positions where you'll split the time. We'll talk about different guys, et cetera, et cetera. This is essentially just Orlando Arcia. There was a sprinkling of Zach Short, Luis Guillorme, Luke Williams, but it's essentially an Orlando Arcia breakdown. And the Braves were in the bottom 5 in baseball last year in Fangraphs WAR at shortstop. Not breaking news to anybody that listens to this podcast probably, but he was not very good last season. I just want to say that out loud for people. It's not just him. It was mostly him, though. And positionally, just to put it in context, the Braves were quite bad at shortstop, and that's honestly why we talk about it so much.
Yeah, right. You don't talk about Matt Olson a ton because Matt Olson is generally a good to elite baseball player, or Austin Riley or Michael Harris or some of the more proven star-level entities on this roster. Clearly shortstop is one of probably 4 position groups on the roster the Braves can and potentially will upgrade this winter. It's not breaking any news to say that Orlando Arcia was unbelievably bad last season. I mean, I knew he was bad from watching him every single night. I think everybody listening does too. But, I mean, statistically speaking, even I was kind of blown away at just how bad Orlando ranked amongst his peers. I mean, legitimately, he was probably the worst offensive player in Major League Baseball last season, at least in a full-time capacity. And that's significant when there's, I don't know, 200 players who could qualify for that unprestigious award. So we wanted to get it in on the chance that the Braves trade for a shortstop tomorrow. We at least wanted to recap Arcia's season and kind of look at some options for next year.
Yeah, like I said, we're going to be doing a lot of these in the next few months. We'll spread them out a little bit when things are not happening, but you'll hear more capsules on position. So it won't just be shortstop. But the reason why we're leading with this before we actually dig into Orlando is that the Braves were ahead of the A's, Marlins, Guardians, who were good, to be fair, and the Tigers at shortstop this year. And that includes his well-documented solid to good defense. So there's always people in our comments or mentions that want to say, well, all he has to do is catch the ball. We generally subscribe to that to a point. If he hits the way he did 2 years ago and he's a slightly below average hitter, that's totally fine. The Braves could live with that, and that's what they were hoping for. I think we all can understand that. Going into last season, the thought was, all right, we have Arcia. He's really cheap. Catch the ball and hit a little bit. The problem was he didn't hit a little bit. he hit zero, essentially. And that leaves you in a place where even when you include the defense, it's bottom five, and you can withstand that. It's like no team has a superstar at every position. The Braves have tried to do that, honestly, with the way they built for the most part. They have 6 or 7 like potential stars or already established stars in their lineup. Most teams don't have 9. In fact, nobody, not even the Dodgers, have 9 stars to roll out there every day. But there is a baseline that he did not reach, and we'll talk about him more in a second. I do want to let you cook, though, Scott, because you were doing some research this week. In a second, I want you to get to a big kind of interesting and fun and potentially scary shortstop idea. First, though, we're from our partners on today's podcast. Okay, Scott, I teased it, but the potentially scary shortstop idea that you didn't make it up, but you found it. So I will give it to you. Tee it up for us. What's going on here?
Yeah, so there was an interesting proposition, not even a proposition, but an idea. So for context, there was a private chat on MLB Trade Rumors where I believe you have to be a paying subscriber to their website in order to view the chat or participate in the chat. But someone, I don't know who, but somebody asked the MLB Trade Rumors writer to say an unexpected or kind of out of nowhere move that was going to happen this offseason. And this writer said that it was going to be the Atlanta Braves trading for Trevor Story of the Boston Red Sox.
Bum, bum, bum. Yeah.
The Braves, man, they towed a very thin line this time a year ago when they traded for a former teammate of Trevor Story with Chris Sale. Trading for Trevor Story now is almost like more scary and more risky than trading for Chris Sale a year ago, and that says something. But I also don't think it's impossible, and there might be something to it. So we at least wanted to hit on this, not even a rumor, but idea that somebody who is connected into the game kind of threw out there as a possibility of a trade that nobody really sees coming.
Yeah, to be clear, I know Scott did say this, but this is not a rumor. No one's reported this. No one has reported this. This is just totally speculative. It does kind of make sense with the way that Alex tends to do things. He kind of gets creative sometimes, and he's been good with these moves. No one was talking about Chris Sale a year ago, as Scott's referencing. But Story just turned 32 years old. He has had some injury issues, especially the last couple of years. Before that, he was a top-tier shortstop. Not like an absolutely elite guy, but certainly a star level player for several seasons, dating back to Colorado, and that's why he ended up in Boston on a big deal. All those things. He makes a lot of money. That's the biggest reason why this would be so risky, is that he makes a lot of money. But he got hurt last year, fracturing a shoulder. He had an elbow issue the year before that. He's making between 22 and 25 million for the next 3 seasons. So that's not nothing. That's why when Scott says it's more risky, that's the reason. Sales money was shorter. The Red Sox also paid a lot of it, which I think we probably let's just stop right here, Scott. if this were to happen, big if, I can't imagine the Braves taking all of the money. It would almost have to be Boston paying some money, right?
Yeah.
Like, am I crazy?
No, you're not crazy. Significant money would have to come from Boston to Atlanta to help cover his deal the next 3 years. But there has been some reporting in Boston that they are looking to kind of shake up the team quite a bit, get some more balance, move some pieces around. So again, man, I don't think Brad or I are saying this is going to happen next week or anything like that, but it was at least interesting enough that we wanted to chat about it for a couple minutes.
Yeah, and Story, even though some of his numbers are cores inflated because he was playing in Colorado, but even with the positional adjustments and the park adjustments at Fangraphs, etc., he was a 6-win player at one point in his career, a couple 4-win seasons. Like, he's always been good, not quite to the Sale level where, like, you and I said 100 times, Sale has always been good when he's been healthy. Story's not always been good, but he's mostly been good when healthy. It's just that he hasn't been healthy for a long time. So we could probably stop on this now. It's just interesting idea that you stumbled across, and someone that I never would have thought about, honestly. And Alex tends to do this kind of stuff where he gets creative, and it would take Boston wanting to part ways with Story in a way that where they said, "Hey, we'll pay a bunch of this money down if you take him," and you probably send something back to probably a prospect going the other way, a la Vaughn Grissom for Chris Sale, where yes, it was Vaughn Grissom for Chris Sale, but Chris Sale also came with a bunch of money. So yeah, it's an idea, it's a player, but like I know Steven and Sean and you, I believe, talked about trade targets for shortstops at different points in time. I don't think he was referenced on that podcast, at least that I remember, because of how much money he makes. It's kind of a tough sale, but there's a little bit of a through line if you can kind of squint on this one.
Yeah, you would be buying low on a very talented former all-star level player. But again, man, I mean, Story, not only does he make a lot of money the next 3 years, but he, as mentioned, had a shoulder injury, had an elbow injury, has had a history of some nagging ligament and tendon injuries as well. Basically has not played more than 140 games since 2021. So it's been a long time since Trevor Story was back at the level that he once was. He's also 32 years old, which is not ancient by any means, but of course you're going to have him for age 32, 33, and 34. So yeah, I mean, without knowing what a Willy Adames is going to command on the free agent market, if it's a number that we're all comfortable with, then by all means, I would love to add Willy Adames to this team. Similar with Ha-Seong Kim, big fan of his if the contract is right, but the contract might not be right. I mean, Willy Adames might get an 8-year, $200 million deal, and if Ha-Seong Kim blows everyone away and gets a 3 or 4 year pact at a high dollar, then it's like, okay, if Boston's willing to include quite a bit of money and maybe the Braves can afford to take on some risk and some bounce back potential, it's not impossible. So we at least wanted to throw that out there before we really dug into Arcia.
All right, Scott, you ready to talk about Orlando Arcia with some depth?
No.
We'll do. That's why I asked. Let's start positive, shall we? And that's his defense, right? So let's begin there quickly, at least. There's actually a discussion point here because, by all accounts, Orlando is a solid to good defender. Would you agree with that broad premise from me?
Yes,
Scott. Solid to good defender, right?
Solid to good.
But he's not elite or spectacular. He is not Andrelton Simmons. He is not what Dansby was in Atlanta at times. He's a good defender. He's not a game-changing defender. Just for reference on this is last season mostly, but he ranked 11th last year in Fangraphs' overall defensive value metric at shortstop. So above average. Good defender, not top 10, good. Defensive run save, didn't love him, but he was quite good in the StatCast metrics, especially the range metric. They're outs above average. It's kind of funny though, Scott. He's extremely slow. Like, it's not it's not always foot speed versus quickness. For instance, Andrelton Simmons was not a super fast runner at any point, but like to be really good at shortstop and be that slow, he's 13th percentile in sprint speed. That's like really slow. It's like first baseman slow. So credit to him. He's still a really good, solid defender. But I wonder what you think about this framing because, I don't even know who we're arguing with, but it might be different around Orlando. And we're saving the bat for a second because it's going to be pretty grim. We talk about the numbers. Would it be different for you if he actually was a great defender? Like great. And I mean great. Would you feel differently even after last season which was so bad at the plate, and we'll get to that in a second. Okay. For instance, let's use our old friend Nicky Lopez. He was a brief member of the Braves. Nicky Lopez is a fantastic defender by all accounts. Numbers wise, he's up there on the level of top 3 or 4 in the league. He doesn't hit. And that was the whole thing about Nicky Lopez. But if you play him every day with his glove, he's going to get you 2 or 3 WAR just with the glove. Whereas Orlando, we saw this year, it's 1 year, he doesn't guarantee you that. So would you feel differently about 2025 and beyond if Orlando actually was a great defender in the way that some people think that he is, honestly? Braves, mostly Braves fans that are just being hopeful, I think. But what do you think about that difference, if that makes sense?
Yeah. To answer your question, yes. I mean, if he was maybe not Andrelton Simmons, because I mean,
no
Andrelton was
other than Ozzie Smith.
Yeah,
or
I mean,
Snow.
For my life of watching baseball live, of course, there's players from decades ago that I didn't have a chance to see live, but I mean, Andrelton Simmons is the best defensive baseball player I have ever seen, at least in Atlanta. Andrew Jones, incredible, but
it's a 2-man list between Andrew and Andrelton in my lifetime, basically, for the Braves, for sure.
Yeah. So, Arcia, I've seen it. I mean, I've been tweeting about him or talking about him, and people, he's a Gold Glover. You can't knock that. And I disagree with that. I think Orlando is perfectly fine at shortstop. You can do a lot worse, but no, I mean, he is not so good defensively that I feel like, you can survive with him. The way this offseason is going to go, the Braves might just try to run it back again in 2025, which would probably drive me a little crazy and others crazy as well. So if he was really, really good defensively, I'd probably feel a little bit differently, but he's not. I mean, he's fine. I think Orlando Arcia does a very good job of making the plays that he's supposed to make.
Yep.
He's not a high error guy. I mean, errors are kind of a terrible way to judge fielders on the whole, but doesn't commit a lot of errors, is pretty good on turning double plays. If the ball is hit in his vicinity, he generally makes the play the Braves need him to make, but he's not like saving a run every single night the way an elite shortstop or an elite center fielder can. I've never felt that way about him. And of course, as he gets older, he's not suddenly just going to become even better defensively. It's usually something that gets worse as you age.
And to your point there, like, he does have pretty good range numbers, but he actually is quite strong in fielding percentage, which is basically not making errors. And as we progress as a baseball society, we kind of understand now that's not really the best way to judge fielding, but he doesn't make big mistakes. And that is good. I mean, you want that, but he doesn't add a ton either, and look, I will always say this: fielding metrics are more flawed than hitting metrics. They just are. And everyone acknowledges that. Even the zealots about defensive metrics will tell you they are not perfect. They are not as accurate as hitting metrics are. But when you have a 6-7 year sample size on a guy, and he's really never been elite in defensive metrics, you start to get a more appropriate feeling of that he's not. It's like, if he had one outlier season, it's like, okay, maybe he's got there, but like he's just pretty good. He's maybe good. If you want to use the word good, I'm okay with that. Saying he's a good defender, I'm totally good with that.
Yeah,
he's just not a great one. So that's kind of a little bit of a wrong turn on this conversation, but I just came to my mind, like, because look, people listening to us know this, especially you, Scott. I'm not trying to put it on you because I agree with you on this, for the record. But you're the anti-Arcia guy in some circles. You're kind of like, get me out of here. I'm done. I'm all set with this. Am I being unfair? I feel like that's accurate.
Yeah.
And I think it might be different if he actually was that defender, and he's just not.
Mm-hmm. And if he was a really good fielder and even like a below average hitter, like running a 90 WRC plus, which.
Well, that's where he was too. Like, honestly, I'm looking at the offense now. Like, the argument for Arcia was the year before, where he actually was exactly that: good defender, below average hitter, and that's a decent enough, not a great player, but a starting caliber shortstop, even on a good team. He was like a 1.5, 2 win player in 2023. You can live with that.
He might have been even more like 2.3, 2.4,
maybe.
Something like that. Yeah, I mean,
mid twos.
If you told me that Orlando Arcia could give the Braves 2 WAR next season, I would take it all day of the week, and I would quit yelling about every possible shortstop who could be available this winter, because I wouldn't feel like it would be such a priority for the Braves. but really since the All-Star break last year, so mid 2023, he has been so bad offensively. There's nothing. I mean, literally nothing. He has one of the worst offensive profiles I have ever seen on Baseball Savant across the board. Batting average, on base, slugging, line drive, sweet spot, barrel rate. He sucks at all of them. And I hate to be so critical of a player, of a team that's won however many, an average of 95 wins a season the last 7 years or whatever the crazy number is. But the approach is bad and the results are bad. And I've said it probably on every other show this winter, if there is any way to improve this position, you have to go out and do it. It's too important of a position for the Atlanta Braves and really baseball as a whole to be running out the worst offensive player in the game at that spot.
Okay, Scott teased it up there. So let's get into the numbers a little bit. I'll try to be brief, everybody, because they're not great from last season. Scott is accurate in that he was literally the worst qualified position player in baseball last year in FanGraphs' overall offensive value metric. Now, one small counter, is that I use the word qualify, which means you have to play a lot. Most guys that struggle the way he did don't play that much, which is why they don't qualify. But there's some level you have to get to actually play that much. So there's something like that. But he was in the bottom 3 in WRC plus on base percentage. He was bottom. This is not just about shortstop. This is about all offensive players, everybody, not just shortstops, all players. Bottom 10 in slugging percentage. He was bad in high leverage. All of those things across the board. And you alluded to it with his StatCast profile, and I know that not everybody loves the batted ball stuff. I understand that. But the reason why I'm about to bring this up is sometimes you can have a noisy variant season. It's happened to Braves players on good ways and bad ways, right? Where you can have the season from hell, basically, and you're hitting the ball hard, and it's not going well for you. Honestly, Marcell Ozuna, pre-Renaissance, had a couple of these seasons where he was hitting the ball hard. His batted ball profile looked pretty good, actually. And it was like, man, is he really this bad? Like, what's going on here? And they suddenly was good again. I'm not projecting that for Arcia. But anyway, it was not just like he got unlucky, is why I'm saying that. He was really bad in how he hit the ball, which is all you can really ask for, like breakdown. He was truly bottom of the barrel in all the expected batting average stats, slugging percentage, xWOBA, like Scott said, barrel rate. Pick your stat. He was bad in it last year. There's nothing, truly nothing encouraging. And I tried to find something encouraging for this podcast. It's not fun for us to come on here and be like, all right, he was terrible. I wanted to come up with an angle. I don't really have one for you. The only one that I have for you is his history. So I'm going to ask this question to you, Scott. Orlando pre-last season, even when you factor in his 2021, where he kind of fell apart in Milwaukee and got moved as a result. And by the way, he used to be a big-time prospect. The Brewers were all in on Arcia. He was their guy at shortstop. He was so bad. Even when you include that year, over a 4-year sample size from 2020 to 2023, it was like 1,100 plate appearances. Like, it's a pretty big sample. He had a 96 WRC plus. That's perfectly fine for shortstop.
Mm-hmm.
So that on one side, this year and all of the unredeeming badness on the other. Is there any chance if they just said, okay, Orlando, we're gonna give you not the season because you can't do that, but we're gonna have shortstop be the spot that we are saving on or whatever we have under contract. You got 2 months, Orlando, to prove you can actually do this for us. Is there any chance he bounces back to some degree? Not like he's a good hitter, Scott, but you know me, I tend to like sample size. I tend to like looking at more than one season. So is there any argument for it? Like, okay, if you're projecting him for next year, I think he'd almost have to be better than he was last year. Just by logic. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's just it's tough.
Do I think there's a world Orlando Arcia is better next year? Sure.
I think it's a likely world, honestly. I mean, I'm not saying it's for sure, but I mean, okay, what's Steamer's out, right?
I don't want to find out, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think we agree on that. I'm just trying to give a comprehensive picture of what's going on here. We do agree on that, for the record.
Yes, there's a new hitting coach coming in. Maybe he can work with Orlando to refine his approach at the plate a little bit. I mean, Orlando is the king of taking himself out of at bats, swinging at a 2-0 pitch off the plate where it should have been 3-0, but instead it's 2-1, and 2 pitches later he's out. Or taking a 3-0 fastball right down the middle of the plate. It's just his approach is really bad. And you don't have to be like an advanced scout or anything like that to see it. I mean, watch 5 of his plate appearances on any given night as a casual fan, and you go, God, what is his approach up there? Is he sitting fastball? Is he sitting breaking stuff? Is he trying to be aggressive? Is he trying to be patient? It's just a lot of hacking without any kind of plan. So sure, could Orlando, if he is the shortstop next year, could he be better? I mean, frankly, it would be hard to be worse than what he was this past season. But it's a good point that you made that over that 4-year period, he was a totally fine-ish hitter at the shortstop position that would not kill you if that's what he was. I'm just not sure that guy exists anymore.
I think we basically agree on that. Because of the age he is, he's not super young, but he's only 30. There are guys who are done at 30. Like they lose something or whatever, and physically it doesn't, like, not everyone ages the same. So 30 is a lot younger than some guys just fall off, right? But it does happen. Some guys are just done. Maybe he is done. And like we said, the batted ball profile would tell you it was not luck based this year. He was just playing poorly. But like, for instance, I just looked up his ZiPS projection. So Dan Zaborski at Fangraphs puts up his ZiPS system, which is really, really useful. We'll probably do a dive on that later on the whole roster. But he has Arcia for an 80 WRC, 80 OPS plus, which is not WRC plus. It's similar-ish. Yep. That's better than he was last year, but still bad, if that makes sense. Like, we wouldn't take that. I think you said this earlier, but if you could pencil Arcia in for even a 90 WRC plus next year, it's so easy to be like, all right, I can live with that. It's a 2-win player, 1.5 2-win player, bat ninth every day. He won't murder you. It's just if 90 becomes 70, that may not seem like much. That's a big drop at the plate over a large sample size, because like we said, he's playing every single day. Like, some of these guys are platooning. Your Adam Duvall had a terrible season last year, right? To use Adam Duvall as an example, he was awful. But you didn't have to play him. And they stopped playing him because he was awful. With Arcia, you can't stop playing him. You have no one else. At least on the team on the team this last season, there was no other option. And that is where you really, really, really get in a bind at a position like shortstop. So maybe it's just you have to get a better backup shortstop if you're going to go with that. No matter what, we agree. We don't want to have this roller coaster again, personally. I do think there's a world on December 1st that he's the shortstop opening day. That's still a world that's possible, even if we're not going to like it.
Yeah. I mean, if I had to put every dollar to my name, who's starting shortstop for the Atlanta Braves on opening day in San Diego in a few months, I'm going to say it's Orlando Arcia.
Well, if you have one name, it has to be him right now.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be.
Yeah. So, I sincerely hope the Braves can go out and add a better shortstop this winter. If they were to go and add a really, really, really good hitting corner outfielder, and then at some point in the first half, you're going to get Ronald Acuna Jr. back. And let's hope that the new hitting coach can get something back with Sean Murphy and get him back on track. And Matt Olson and Austin Riley's healthy, and Michael Harris takes a step forward. Maybe Ozzy Albies has more of a 2023 season than 24. Like, if you go out and add a really good bat to the corner, I think this team is going to be fine if Orlando Arcia is the shortstop. But man, if there's any way to improve the position, I hope they do it. And it's just too important, man. Like, it's not left field where they've had this carousel for 5 years now and can't solidify it, even though they've tried with Kelnick and Rosario and Soler and everybody else. Shortstop is one of those spots you just have to have locked up because it's so hard to find good shortstops. And it's obviously easier said than done. It's not as if there were a half dozen shortstops out there for Alex to just go and pick and choose from. But there are resources, both financially and in a potential trade with prospects, where they could get a deal done. And I sure hope they do.
Yeah, we agree there. It's just it's so hard on one hand to acquire shortstop. which we've all said. You and I have said it. Sean and Steven have said it. It's so hard to get a shortstop because once you have one, you protect that player with your life, basically, as a franchise. You don't want to lose that guy unless you just can't pay him anymore. Like the guys who went for agency a few years ago, the Seager, Bogarts, Lindor tier of guy, they just at some point might get priced out of their spot. But like Bobby Witt Jr. just signed a massive extension in Kansas City because they're like, hey, you're not leaving. Like, you're our guy. It doesn't matter whatever else happens. There is an argument, just to say it out loud, and I think we don't love it, but if you do upgrade, I think it is untenable. That's our position as a podcast. I think generally, you can't leave left field and shortstop the way they have been recently. If you do one, the other one seems like it's a little bit more tenable. Like if you and same thing in reverse. If you get Willy Adames or whatever at shortstop, you can kind of live with a platoon in left field or whatever, figure it out. You can have one spot you don't like in the lineup. It's a lot easier to do that with one spot. Having two is where it gets really tough. And at shortstop, you can't platoon. In left field, you can platoon. It's really easy. I mean, I shouldn't say easy. It's a lot easier to platoon. It may not be pretty out there, but you can realistically find a lefty masher and a righty masher, smash them together. That's not easy to do. Like you have to, like in game, there's some navigation there that has to happen, but you can plug the dam there so much easier. Even during the season, we saw it in 2021. We don't always use that example is such an obvious one, but you can lose the whole outfield and replenish it in 2 weeks. You can do it. Shortstop, you can't do that.
Right.
You can find a guy that can catch the ball. You can find Nick Allen, who the Braves did acquire this winter already, to be their backup. Nicky Lopez, but worse type. Luke Williams is available for you. Like they got Kevin Biggio on the scrap heap in August this year, right? Those guys are available, but they can't hit. That's why they're available.
Yeah. And you made a point a moment ago. Yes, you can have one weak spot in your lineup when everything is healthy and going right.
Well, yeah.
But of course, the likelihood that you're going to have an entire lineup healthy and going well for 162 is basically impossible. So
we saw that this year. That was a shining example in 2020.
There were a couple of injuries this past season, Brad. I don't know. Maybe we talked about them on this show a few times.
There were a few.
Yeah.
There were a few injuries. So looking ahead briefly, and then we'll sign off. With no changes, Fangraphs, the combination of their projections, step charts, etc., has the Braves at 27th in baseball at shortstop. So they're taking their numbers and looking ahead with their systems and projecting the Braves to be just as bad with the current crop. And that includes Arcia. So you don't have to believe us if you don't want to, but the people who are smarter than us with the numbers, like Dan, people that run Fangraphs, and look, they're not infallible. They missed two, and he'll be the first person to tell you that. The Braves are projected 27th in the majors at shortstop right now. And that's a combination of mostly Arcia, a little bit of Nick Allen, a little bit of Nacho Alvarez. But like, it is not going to probably be good if they just run Arcia back. You're hoping for them to be, 20th in the league at shortstop if he comes back? Is that realistic? That's a high-end outcome for Arcia at shortstop. I know he's an all-star. I want to say this out loud one time. I know he was an all-star in 2023. I do know that happened. That's the kindest thing that I can say. That did happen. He's never been that good of a player. I think that's pretty obvious. Even in that moment, he was hot. It wasn't crazy that he made the team when they picked the team because he had good numbers at that point in time. The Braves were rolling. I understood it. He is not an all-star level player, nor has he ever been. Even in that moment, he was not an all-star level player. Just say that out loud.
No. All-star Orlando Arcia. What a season. What a year 2023 was.
Well, and to be kinder to him than we have been for most of this podcast, there are many worse players that have been all-stars than Orlando Arcia. There are.
Yeah, probably.
Well, no, Orlando Arcia, I mean, we're going to end this on a high note, Scott. Orlando Arcia has been a starting caliber infielder in the major leagues for 7 seasons. That's a nice career.
Oh, I mean,
it might be over, but
outcome so far is a dream for 97% of the players in the minor leagues.
And that's what I'm saying. So it's not like he's not, and honestly, like he's been a useful player. The All-Star thing is an outlier. He was the shortstop on a World Series winning team. He was on the team. He was not the shortstop, but he was on the team. He played in the playoffs as a backup infielder. He signed to one last thing. He's signed to a contract, and this is not new ground if you listen to the podcast recently. He signed to a deal that pays him like a utility infielder. And there is some utility in that kind of contract because you can sign a guy or trade for a guy and still have Orlando on your team, and Orlando is paid like he's your backup infielder. So that's a nice thing to have. And by the way, that's probably his best role. Either that or he's probably best suited to be a starting shortstop on a not so good team. Either one of those is fine. Those are both very viable things. He's making what, I should know this off the top of my head, but it's like $3 million, something like that this year for Orlando Arcia. It's not a lot of money. And that actually gives you some flexibility that the Braves, actually it's less. It's $2 million this year.
Yeah.
Whew. Bargain, honestly. I mean, all joking aside, that's a bargain for him.
Yeah, in a perfect world, he is a really solid utility infielder for the Atlanta Braves. At this point, Ozzie Albies has been injured quite a bit in recent years. Whoever, let's say the Braves had a shortstop, of course, that player can get hurt just like anybody else. If Austin Riley were to go down, you could probably put Arcia at third base. Again, you need depth to navigate 162 games, and let's hope, or at least my hope, is that Orlando is that backup infielder and not a player penciled in for another 600 plate appearances at shortstop. I just think this team can and should aim higher, and hopefully that's something they're able to accomplish this offseason.
Yep, he played some third in Milwaukee. He's played second with the Braves. He played like 50 games at second base in 2022 because Ozzie was hurt. Like, that's what happens. There's utility in that. And it's not personal either. Like, about Wildcats, everybody seems to like Orlando, so it's not about that either. Just want to throw that out there.
It's never personal on these shows.
No vitriol whatsoever.
Never. Seems like a great dude. He has a bunch of kids. He's always playing with his kids.
I am sure he wants to be better than he was this last season at the plate too.
Yes.
Everyone understands that. And my last publicly positive thing is that I do believe he would be better in 2025 than 2024 in the same role. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to be good, but if you said, all right, simulate the season again, I think he would be better next year than he would have been last year. So I'm not convinced of that. I'm not saying it's 100% sure, but I think that my brain tells me he would be a little bit better. So that's a nice positive way to end this podcast. Scott, I will not make you give any retort to that. Anything to share before we get out of here on this Sunday evening?
Before we wrap, Brad is now going to sing the Michigan fight song to all.
I'm not going to sing, but I'm quite. It was a good weekend. Enjoyed that. I had the. Sometimes this Scott as a fan of certain franchises, the Kings for one, Colts sometimes. Sometimes you go into a game and you have quite literally zero expectations of positive outcomes, and I was pretty close to that on Saturday with Michigan Ohio State. Once the game started, I started to believe, and that could be the worst thing for you. I was my guard was going down throughout the game, but I had fun. So that was a good win. I enjoyed that immensely. So thank you for calling that out. I'm not going to sing, but I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Of course, most of our listeners are either SEC or ACC people, Tech people. If they're not SEC people, there's been some carnage in those leagues the last couple of weeks. The Georgia Tech game, I have no dog in the fight. That was a wild one on Friday. So we're not going to litigate fandom of college football on the show. I'm in a safe space mostly as a Michigan fan, and Scott's an Arizona alum, so no one's rooting against you other than our guy, Justin Toscano, who's an Arizona State guy. No one else is going to yell at us for these takes, probably. So we're kind of safe there, probably. Yeah. Whereas Steven and Sean are SEC folks, so they are more immersed in the day-to-day. People are going to yell at them if they start talking about football on the podcast.
So I know
you and I are probably safe.
Sean is a huge Tennessee fan, and Steven is Alabama.
Steven's an Alabama fan. Yes, that's correct.
So. Okay, yeah.
So they can't really talk about football on the show, or we're going to lose some listeners because people get mad at them no matter what's going to happen. Same thing with me. Like I host a Hawks podcast, and it's like, hey, Georgia Tech. I don't have a rooting interest, but I wore my Michigan hoodie, Michigan polo shirt on the podcast Saturday night, just quietly. Didn't say anything else. Just wore it, just on my chest. That's all.
That's right. Yeah,
subtle.
It's been a good it was a good, well, I don't want to even say it's a good football weekend because I'm sure a lot of our NFL listeners are pissed off. We won't go down that rabbit hole.
I'm pissed off about the Falcons, but hey, that's okay. I'll trade that for Michigan Ohio State.
We're gonna stop recording now, and then Brad's gonna get out a good 20-minute vent session to me one-on-one. It's Falcons. Sports, as you always say. Sports.
That's correct. Scott, where can folks find you if they are new to the podcast? social media. I know you're a Blue Sky now, like I am. What's going on?
Yeah, same handle, Scott Coleman 55. I'm all over the place if you want to follow along there. We said off the top, again, hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving, and
Yep.
we'll be back. Man, I would love to do an emergency reaction show. I think you would too, Brad. I mean,
it would be easier for us than not having that emergency reaction show to do. Yeah, we'll set up podcasts. I mean, we're planning on, other than last week when it was Thanksgiving, we only did 2 shows, but usually it's going to be 3, even if there's nothing else going on. We'll try to get you 3, but multiple shows each week, other than maybe Christmas week or whatever. But yeah, if there's a show, if there's a transaction worthy of a reaction episode, we will react to it. And the best thing you can do to find the podcast is to subscribe. So if you're just finding us for the first time, thank you. Please go ahead and smash the subscribe button on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts, YouTube as well. If you're a YouTube watcher, thank you. Also, do us a solid and subscribe on an audio platform too. That definitely would help us. And vice versa. If you're an audio listener, subscribe on YouTube. Just helps the show. Likes appreciated too for the algorithm. Scott's a big juice the algorithm guy. He's always asking me about comments on the algorithm. Post your comments, folks. Yell at us if you want to.
Yeah. Well,
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, do what you got to do. Anything to grow the community. And again, for the low price of $0, we are here.
That's right.
To share our Braves takes and reactions. And we always say, I mean, I still get people every once a week or maybe, oh, I had no idea you guys picked it up on a new station, on a new podcast network under a new name. So there's people out there who were longtime listeners on Battery Power and even before that, Talking Chop. And here we are, still grinding, still doing the same thing, of course, with the good gals and guys at Foul Territory now. But it really does help us. And if you have 5 seconds of your time to leave a like or leave a review on Apple or Spotify, that helps us too, gets us in the algorithms. Anything to help out the tech lords, we appreciate it.
That's right. So help us to spread the word. Let's just say that. All right,
go.
everybody. That is it for Scott and I on this first episode of December. Please, one more time, subscribe to the podcast. We'll have more coming up later on this week. And we'll see everybody next time.